Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections along with the daily mains answer writing program. In the analysis part, we'll first have a comprehensive discussion with respect to the evolving relations between India and Afghanistan under Taliban 2.0. Then in the second article, we'll have a discussion with respect to the need of having a holistic demographic mission which caters to the various social aspects. Then in the simplified section, we'll have a look at 5 different articles from a special perspective of UPSC Prelims 2026 along with the value addition. So stay tuned. Coming to the very first topic of today's discussion, this is with respect to India and Taliban 2.0, cautious engagement. After the US withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021, India's engagement with Taliban have often been described as that of strategic pragmatism. Now, what does this particular theme of strategic pragmatism means? It, on one hand, signifies that we have not formally recognized the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, like many other countries. On the other hand, what it signifies is that we have maintained limited pragmatic contact. Limited. Primarily for 2 reasons. First, to deliver on our promises with respect to delivering the humanitarian aids in Afghanistan. And the second, to make sure that our security interests are not compromised. Now, what you have to understand is that yesterday, the Taliban foreign minister met the external affairs minister. And what we are looking at is a kind of an evolution between Taliban-India relations and a kind of upgradation, because the technical mission in Kabul would now soon be upgraded to that of a full-fledged embassy in Kabul. Now see, this is a very important geopolitical development, especially with respect to the construct of South Asia. So what we are going to do today is, we'll first look at the kind of evolution with respect to the relations between India and Taliban. What has been India's approach with respect to Taliban? Second, we'll look at the kind of rationale. Why does India wants to engage with Taliban? What are the reasons behind it? Second, what are the prospects and opportunities? Third, what are the challenges? And finally, the way forward. Believe me, it's a very, very important and probable topic for GS2 international relations and also for PSIR. Now, whenever we talk about the Afghanistan, what you'll have to understand is we often call it as the graveyard of empires. Graveyard of empires. There's also a book, you can also refer this. Why do we call it a graveyard of empires? Because since time immemorial, different powers, be it the Britishers or be it the erstwhile USSR or be it the Americans, they tried to basically dominate over Afghanistan. But none of them were able to have a lasting control in Afghanistan. You talk about the Anglo-Afghan wars, or you talk about the expansion, what the USSR did. It tried to expand the communism in Afghanistan, but it was not successful. Or you talk about the American interventions in Afghanistan. None of these powers were ultimately successful, primarily because of the resistance and the resilience shown by the Afghan people. That is the reason we often call it a graveyard of empires. Now, what you'll have to understand is that US involved itself in Afghanistan. Why? Because after the 9/11 attacks, what the US said was that we are going to launch a particular operation, which was Operation Enduring Freedom. And we will basically make sure that we eliminate Al-Qaeda. And we'll also dismantle the Taliban regime, primarily because it was responsible for sheltering Afghanistan. So that was the reason that US involved itself in Afghanistan. Second thing which you'll have to understand is that it was one of the longest American wars, spanning for almost 20 years, where US spent more than $2 trillion US. Can you imagine? More than $2 trillion US. And almost 2,400 US soldiers were killed in this particular scenario. Next thing which you'll have to understand is that after doing all these interventions in Afghanistan, what US realized that the insurgency in Afghanistan was not stopping. There were some pockets in Afghanistan where there was continuous insurgent activities. Also, there was quite of a corruption which was involved. So therefore, finally, many of the international affairs experts in the US, what they basically advised that regime in the US, that you should basically move out of Afghanistan. And ultimately, the US decided that we are going to have an agreement with Taliban. And therefore, we had a particular agreement which is known as the Doha Agreement of 2020. Note that in this particular agreement, this was concluded between the US and the Taliban. The Afghan government of that time was excluded, right? Now, there were certain conditions which were imposed on Taliban. US said that we are ready to quit. We are ready to withdraw from Afghanistan, but there are two conditions. First, you will not use Afghan soil for any terror activity. And second, you will have to understand that you should cooperate with the Afghan government. You should make sure that you reach to a particular agreement with respect to the Afghan government, which was not possible, which didn't happen, right? Final withdrawal took place in August 2021. And after that, what we saw was that Taliban took over Kabul. The Afghan government at that time, it was completely removed. It was seized. And therefore, now what we have is Taliban 2.0. And this hasn't been recognized by many countries, including India. But there are certain reasons which basically compel India to go for a kind of a strategic engagement with Taliban. And we look at those all reasons. Now, if we look at the India-Afghanistan relations, the overview, what you'll have to understand is that pre-2021, India was one of the largest donors, one of the largest contributing countries with respect to Afghanistan. We contributed more than $3 billion. Can you understand? With respect to the development in Afghanistan, be it you must have heard about the dam, India-Afghanistan Friendship Dam, or be it the Parliament building, or be it different colleges or hospitals. We invested heavily in Afghanistan. Then once we had the Taliban takeover, what happened was that there was a complete chaos. And the very objective of India was to evacuate its own national. And what we basically did was, with time, we established a technical team in Afghanistan. Now, what was the objective of this particular technical team? The embassy was removed, and instead of that, we basically came up with a technical team to make sure that we deliver our humanitarian aids with respect to Afghanistan, and also to coordinate with the Afghan government, right? So that is what the objective of technical team was all about. Current stance, what we are looking at is a picture that we have not formally recognized Taliban in Afghanistan, but we are having contacts. We are delivering humanitarian aids, for example, in the form of wheat, in the form of vaccines or medicines. Second, what you'll have to understand is that we are also delivering a lot of scholarships for the students in Afghanistan, right? And we are also offering scholarships for them so that they can come and study here. So there has been a continuous cooperation with Afghanistan. And see, we have maintained a kind of a very good, what we call as a very credible goodwill among the people of Afghanistan. So we are trying to continue that. But when we talk about the formal engagement, we have not recognized the regime in Taliban. Now, what we are trying to do as of now is that this particular development, that what has changed, that right now we are focusing upon upgrading this particular technical mission to that of a full-fledged embassy. We'll talk about it. Now, see, if you look at the picture, the whole picture, what you'll see is that it is a mix of various approaches. And you should understand what are the kind of approaches we are using in the relationship, in the evolving relationship between India and Afghanistan. The very first is pragmatism. We are not being idealistic. We are being practical. Why? What is the reason? Because the position of Afghanistan, it is very strategic. It is strategically located. And therefore, Afghanistan is very important for us. So we'll have to consider the practical aspects. Second, what you'll have to understand is the humanitarian focus. For decades, we have been investing a lot in the humanitarian aspects, be it the hospitals, the education, the infrastructure projects. So we just want to continue that because we have maintained that goodwill in the hearts of the people of Afghanistan. Next, we have the security first calculus. So you'll have to understand that Taliban is an extremist organization, right? And in the past, it has sheltered a lot many other terror organizations, including Al-Qaeda, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed. So we want to make sure that we convey it in a very categorical manner to the Taliban regime that your soil should not be used for anti-India activity. And therefore, the engagement becomes indispensable, very important. Next, we have the regional balancing. What do we mean by this? See, after the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, there was a kind of a vacuum which was created. And there was a possibility, there is still a possibility of that vacuum being exploited by Pakistan and China. So we wanted to make sure that we should not, be completely isolated from this particular scenario. We should involve ourselves and take it forward. The goodwill which we have maintained, take it forward to new levels without formally recognizing the Taliban regime. So that was a kind of a regional balancing which was required on India's side. Now, what has changed with the recent Muttaqi's visit? Very important to understand that how the relations are now evolving. The very first is high-level contact and upgraded engagement. As I've already told you, that this is the very first engagement after US withdrawal from Afghanistan. And this is the first time that you have a Taliban foreign minister coming India and interacting with our external affairs minister. So this is something which is quite important. Second thing which I'll have to understand is that the technical mission which we have in Kabul would now be upgraded to that of a full-fledged embassy. And that would primarily serve three purposes. The very first is to make sure that we deliver on our humanitarian aids. Second, it would provide the consular services. And third, we would also be able to maintain the security interest. Next is trade momentum and figure cited. Even in this particular chaotic situation, what you'll have to understand is that the trade values between India and Afghanistan, they're quite good. In the financial year 2024-25, the trade value, it crossed $1 billion. Can you imagine? Even in this situation. So there are a lot of possibilities. But there is one thing which you'll have to understand. What Taliban has been pushing for is that it is saying that there should be an opening of the land corridor. Now, this is but obvious that if we open a land corridor, if you just look at this particular picture, if we open a land corridor, it would be via Pakistan. So we have Wagah border and then we have Torkhan, right? Torkhan. Pakistan would never allow this. That's the first thing. Second thing, what you'll have to understand is that the kind of relaxations which we had with respect to the Chabahar port. So US agreed to relieve India with respect to the sanctions it imposed on Iran. And it said that you can definitely carry out the activities. But those relaxations have been cancelled by President Trump. So this is a very tough situation, right? Because right now, the only option we have is the air route, the air freight. So that is very difficult. But Taliban has been pushing, it has been pushing Pakistan to open this particular land corridor. Next, we have the security assurance publicly reiterated. We have made the Taliban foreign minister to say it very categorically that your soil should not be used for any anti-India activity. In the past, Taliban has sheltered many terrorist organizations, be it the Al-Qaeda or Lashkar-e-Taiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed. So we want that its soil should not be used for any anti-India activity, and whatever these terror organizations have done in the past, they need to be made more accountable. They need to be made accountable for their acts, whatever they have done. Next, we have political optics and concerns. Now, this is very important. India has been continuously saying to the Taliban regime that you need to have a more inclusive architecture. You need to have a particular architecture where you give importance to women's rights. But in the press conference, which was held by the Taliban foreign minister, there was no women journalist. So this showed the kind of regressive policies, regressive attitude which Taliban regime has, right? That is one of the very important concerns. Now, what are the reasons, strategic rationale behind India's engagement? Why it is important for India to engage with that of Taliban? The very first is protect the security interests. See, Afghanistan is geostrategically a very important location. And its soil in the past has been used by many terror organizations to inflict damage and atrocities on various countries, including India. India has suffered a lot because of terrorism, we all know that. So we want to make it clear. We want the Taliban regime to say it in a very categorical, very straightforward manner that its soil would not be used for any anti-India activity. That's the very important point to understand. Here we are talking more about the verification and enforcement than that of legitimization of the Taliban regime. Again, an important point to understand. We have invited, there was a meeting with respect to the external affairs ministers and the Taliban foreign minister, more to make sure that they verify it. They say it by themselves that their soil would not be used for any anti-India activity. It was not about legitimizing the Taliban regime. That is what you'll have to understand. Next, we have preserve the connectivity and trade options. Right now, as I told you, that we are having a kind of a very tough situation with respect to the trade. Because the sanctions, the relaxations we had with respect to the sanctions on the Chabahar, they have been cancelled by the US. There is no land corridor which is available. So right now we just have the air freight route. And therefore the Taliban has been pushing Pakistan to open the land corridor, which seems unlikely, right? So there is a very important objective of having economic recovery in Afghanistan. See, if people are economically happy, if they have money in the hands, obviously the situation would turn better, right? So it's very important to have the economic recovery of Afghanistan, and it would in a way also give boost to the Indian exporters. Next thing which you'll have to understand is the humanitarian and soft power reach. For ages, India has enjoyed goodwill in the hearts of the people of Afghanistan, right? So this becomes very important that we continue the humanitarian aid. For example, we have invested a lot with respect to constructing the schools, the hospitals. So we should continue that. We should invest more in that of social infrastructure. And then this would also prevent a vacuum, because US withdrawal created a vacuum, and then that can be exploited by the Chinese or the Pakistanis. So we'll have to prevent it. Next, we have regional balance and influence. If we maintain our own lines of communication with the Taliban regime, then this would basically hedge against the Pakistan-China nexus. This would make sure that we convey our interests, our important security aspects to the Taliban regime in a very categorical manner. So that is something which you'll have to understand. This would, in a way, have a kind of a regional balance. Then what are the challenges which India faces with respect to Taliban? The very first is legitimacy and recognition dilemma. See, we understand that it is the kind of the principles of realpolitik which are playing very important role. The aspects of security, the need of having a very secure subcontinent. But what you'll have to understand is that there is a kind of a dilemma which is there. Because the kind of policies which Taliban is having, they're very regressive in nature. They are against women empowerment. They are not having an inclusive architecture. They're against the minorities. So this becomes a very difficult situation for India, because India has for ages stood for these principles of having a democratic structure, of having a more inclusive architecture. But that is not something which is visible. Though they may have been saying, the Taliban regime, they have been continuously saying that we are working towards it. We are providing for more open environment. See, women are not even allowed to pursue the higher education there. They're not allowed to travel openly in the public spaces. They need a guardian with them. So this is a very tough situation, right? So this is a kind of a dilemma which India faces. And that is, again, we need to balance the realpolitik needs against normative costs. Because what are the costs involved? We are, in a way, legitimizing the regime. If we are having more of interactions with them, though we may have not agreed to give a full-fledged recognition to the Taliban regime, but what we have done is that, in a way, we are legitimizing the interactions. And that is something which can basically cost us, because we have been abiding by certain principles. And there is a normative cost which is there. Normative means the values. Next, we have counterterrorism reliability. Though they have been saying that we will not allow the Afghan soil to be used against anti-India activities. But again, declarations are one thing, and what you do on the grounds are another thing. Looking at the past, it is very clear that Taliban has sheltered many terror organizations. So therefore, their actions, we often say actions must speak louder than words. So that is what up to the Taliban to decide. They'll have to show through their actions. Commitments are just declarative. Next, we have human rights and domestic political optics. We are having a kind of a limited interaction with Taliban. But what about the domestic voices? The government would have to basically convince people that this particular interaction is very important. Knowing that Taliban is a very regressive regime. It is basically suppressing the rights of the women and the minorities. And also internationally, what would India say? So there has to be a moral credibility. India would have to retain that moral credibility. Then we have connectivity constraints. There have been sanctions on Iran. So the kind of relaxations which India had with respect to Chabahar, they have been cancelled. There is no land corridor. The only way which we have through which we can trade is the air freight. But that is very expensive. More economical is the land corridor. So these are the areas which we'll have to look into. Then we have internal instability in Afghanistan. Very, very important point to understand. See, Taliban is a kind of a tribal society. And there are many factions over there. There is still internal strife, internal conflict in Afghanistan. And that is one of the reasons which basically makes the whole regime very fragile. Economically, it is very poor, right? So the whole situation in Afghanistan is very fragile. And at any point of time, any event can take place. So that is what you'll have to understand. And therefore, this makes India that it should be ready for any contingencies, whatever happens, be it the evacuation plan or for, India needs to basically secure its border. There can be flow of refugees, right? Now, what are the prospects and opportunities? Again, this topic is really very important because Taliban has been an entity which has shaken the US authorities. And especially considering the security architecture in the subcontinent, this particular topic becomes very, very important and probable topic. Then we have trade and people-to-people ties. This is a very good sign. We have already crossed $1 billion of trade. So we can have more prospects if we basically convince the Americans or convince the West that this particular trade route via the Chabahar needs to be made open. So then, therefore, there can be more prospects involved. Then we have people-to-people ties. There are so many Afghan students in India, right? So if we basically work upon the trade aspects, definitely we can have more people-to-people linkages. Then we have Chabahar's potential. Chabahar is something which India has developed in Iran, the Chabahar port. And this is very important point, not just with respect to Afghanistan, but also further to Central Asia. That is what we'll have to understand. So we'll have to convince the Americans that they should not let the Indian things become a sabotage of or the sufferers of these sanctions imposed by the US. Then humanitarian diplomacy. There is a very good will which is there with respect to the Indians, right? So that has to be maintained. Humanitarian diplomacy, you may not accept the Taliban regime, but the humanitarian diplomacy has continued, and that is something which is very important. Be it the supplies of the wheat, be it the supplies of the vaccines, be it the supplies of the other important amenities, that has continued. Then we have counter-terror cooperation, but this is conditional. Why? See, Afghanistan needs to show that yes, it is taking verifiable actions against the operatives which are working in Afghanistan against India. So that has to be conditional. It can only be conditional, right? That once it shows to Indians that yes, we are taking some actions, we can definitely cooperate. Then regional forums for consensus. Let's talk about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or let's talk about the Moscow format. Just before a few days we discussed that. Or let's talk about the Heart of Asia Conference. In these particular regional forums, we should talk about having a stable Afghanistan, having an Afghanistan which is having a more inclusive architecture, where the rights of the women and the minorities are respected. And that has to be in a way. The Taliban regime must be pressurized for that, right? Now, what should be the way forward for India? We need to have a pragmatic conditional approach. Use these words in your answer. Pragmatic, considering the security aspect, as Afghanistan has been time and again used for anti-India activities, for terror operations. Therefore, we need to make it very clear to the Afghan authorities that this should not be done. Second, on the aspects of conditions. Conditional. Why? That once you will show to us, first, that you are working against these terror operatives. Once you will give us credible proof, then we'll cooperate more, be it on the economics aspect or be it on the other aspects. Second, you will have to convince that the kind of architecture you are having with respect to the governance, it is more inclusive, where you are respecting the rights of the women, where you are allowing the women to study. That is something which needs to be made very clear to the Taliban authorities. So use this particular word of pragmatic conditional approach. Maintain a no recognition and enhanced functional engagement. We would not recognize the regime, but we would slowly increase the kind of functional interaction with the Taliban regime, so as to make sure that our security interests are not compromised. That is what you'll have to understand, and also to continue the humanitarian aid, which we are doing in Afghanistan for years. Then we have insist on verifiable counter-terror guarantees. You'll have to, the Taliban regime, they'll have to give us verifiable proof that we are doing these actions, we have taken these actions against these terror operatives who have worked against India's interests. And only then we'll be able to have more, forums, more collaborative forums. And how that is possible? Verifiable. Matlab kya hai? How we can do so? That you give us proof, you give us the intelligence that what all actions you have taken, or let's jointly investigate, right? So that is something which is really needed. Link economic cooperation to clear benchmarks. If you are going to allow women to study, if you are going to give freedoms to the minorities, then we'll have the economic cooperation. We'll have to link on measurable human rights progress. The kind of progress you have in the human rights, that is going to be linked to the economic cooperation. Then we have invest in humanitarian and developmental footprint. The same thing. Invest in the health aspects. Or why not just, right now we have a very strong digital public infrastructure in India. Utilize that. What we have done in Africa, Pan-Africa e-network. Why not we can have similar tele-education or telemedicine structure in Afghanistan? Definitely that would be really helpful for the Afghan people, right? Use regional and global diplomacy. this is something which you'll have to understand. Talk with Americans. I'm talking about Indians. Indians need to talk with Americans or talk with the Russians. Why to Americans? To convince them to please make sure that you give relaxations with respect to Chabahar port so that we can have more interactions with Afghanistan and then further to Central Asia. That's the first thing. Second, interact more with Russia so as to create a pressure on the Taliban regime so that they respect the rights of the women. They respect the rights of the minorities. They make, if not democratic, at least have a little bit of open society where people can express their freedoms. You're not even allowing women to move freely on the roads. This is, again, you're going to a medieval era, right? Protect India's domestic and international credibility. How we can do so? We need to make it clear to the global community that our stand is very clear. We are for inclusive architecture. We are for women's rights. And therefore, we have not recognized the Taliban regime. But we are having a limited interaction primarily because of our security interests. That is what we'll have to convey. Next, we have prepare the contingency and resilience plan. Why? Because any day, the whole system can collapse. There are different factions. There are tribal groups over there, right? So we need to be ready. We need to make our borders more robust. We need to have proper plans with respect to refugee influx. See, again, very, very important topic. And yes, we are having interaction with the Taliban 2.0, but the evolution of this particular relation would depend upon the kind of steps which Taliban takes. And once it does something which is in line of India's interests, once it gives us verifiable proof that it is taking actions against those entities which are doing anti-India activities, definitely this relation can be still evolved, right? We can have a more strengthened relations. But again, one more condition has to be that it has to respect the women rights, specifically the gender rights and the minority rights. A very, very important topic. Let's have a mains practice question. Examine India's policy of strategic pragmatism towards Taliban administration in Afghanistan. Examine, right? You'll have to talk about it. Discuss a key security, humanitarian and normative challenges. Normative means value, right? And suggest a balanced way forward. Very, very important topic. First visit after 2021. Do write a particular answer in this question. And again, if you're liking the initiative, do not forget to press the like button and also let us know in the comments. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to the need for a holistic demographic mission. On 15th August 2025, the Prime Minister of India from the Rampart Fort, he said that we will soon have a demographic mission, primarily to monitor the undocumented migration we are having across the border, that is from Bangladesh to India. What the authors in this particular column are arguing is that we need to have a quite broad vision. We cannot have such a narrow perspective. What kind of broad vision they're talking about? They're saying that in the kind of demographic mission which we'll have, various aspects should be incorporated. For example, the age and gender composition, the trends with respect to the migration, the longevity trends which India is witnessing, and then the policy aspects must also be given. The policy directives must also be given, that how we can improve upon these aspects, right? So very good column. Primarily talks about the population and demography, right? A true demography mission needs to examine India's various transformation, not just the kind of migrations we are having across the border, right? That is what we'll have to understand. First of all, what do we mean by demography? See, demography is the scientific study of population. The scientific study of the size of the population, the composition, the structure of the population, and the changes over time, right? And there are various indicators. You must have heard about the crude birth rate, the crude death rate, the total fertility rate, the life expectancy, right? So all those are indicators with respect to the demography. They make us aware that what kind of changes are taking place with respect to a particular population. That is what demography is all about. Now, if you look at the kind of phases, India has witnessed a kind of transition. What we generally talk about is the demographic transition with respect to the population. The high stationary phase, it was basically pre-1920s, pre-independence, it featured, the characteristics of this particular period were high birth and death rates because of the lack of medical facilities and stagnant growth. Then we have the early expanding from 1920s till 1950s and even further to 60s. Death rate falls because of the provisioning of the health services. Birth rate still high, therefore we have a kind of a population boom. Then late expanding from 1970s till the 2000s. Decline in the fertility, primarily because of the interventions, the forcible interventions made by the government, right? and slower growth. Then we have low stationary from 2010 onwards, low birth and death rates nearing the replacement level. What is the replacement level fertility? Replacement level fertility is that total fertility rate by which the population exactly replicates, right? There is no increase or decrease. That is, the population exactly replicates. That is what you have to understand, and it is 2.1. The total fertility rate of 2.1 is known as replacement level fertility. Now, if you look at the current status with respect to India's demography, as per the National Family Health Survey 5, the total fertility rate is 2.0. It has gone below that of the replacement level. Then we have the life expectancy. What does it mean if we have the TFR lower than that of replacement level? That we'll have a kind of a narrowing of the population. The population would decrease. Life expectancy 70.1. The infant mortality rate 28 per 1,000. Literacy rate 77.7%. Working age population is 67. This is very, very important to understand. What we often talk about is the demographic dividend. So working age population is 67%. India is thus in a demographic dividend phase, a window expected to last till 2055. Now again, this is again by the Ernst & Young, EY, and it says India's working age population to the total population ratio will be the highest of any large economy. So what the infographic says is that in 2030, the working age population would be 68.9% with respect to India, and this was 72.9 with respect to China, but we'll have in 2030. So we'll have to look upon this aspect. This is also one of the very important infographics given by India Today Group. It says India's population double of China by 2100. India's population is projected to grow and peak by 2064, while China will continue to fall. You can just look at the difference. So we have a lot of opportunities. There are different prospects which are available based upon the kind of trends which we are witnessing in the population. We have a very young population. More than 65% of the population is below the age of 35 years of age. So we have a lot of opportunities. What really matters is that we, in a very good manner, how to basically optimize or utilize this particular demographic dividend and to make sure that it doesn't convert into a demographic disaster. That is what you'll have to understand. Now, what the editorial says is that the announcement of the demographic mission on August 15, 2025 has to be more broad-based, right? The demographic issues in India, what it is just focusing upon is the monitoring the undocumented migration from Bangladesh. That is a very narrow focus. Rather, we should have a more broad focus, need a more broader and holistic demographic approach. It primarily talks about three things. The very first is that we need to go beyond the fertility, mortality, and migration. We need to focus upon a detailed aspect of the age and gender composition. We cannot just restrict with respect to the mortality and fertility. We need to go into the various aspects, the age, sex composition, or the regional diversity which we have across the country, right? We cannot just focus upon narrow parameters. Regional distribution of different households. See, again, what you'll have to understand is primarily the kind of surveys which we are having in the country. First of all, they are focused on the cities. They are focused upon certain pockets. We are not considering the other areas, the remote corners of the country, right? Whenever we talk about these surveys and everything, we hardly focus upon the districts or the rural areas. We mostly focus upon the city centers, right? So the mega cities. So that is something which you'll have to understand. Emerging human capabilities. As the population is young, we need to focus upon the human capabilities. We need to make sure that we focus upon the skill development. But there are severe issues. What are the issues? Education and skill infrastructure. See, whenever we talk about the education system in the country, we often say that we have islands of excellence in a sea of mediocrity. What it means? That we have certain institutions, for example, the Indian Institute of Technologies or Indian Institute of Space Research or the different NITs. But what we often fail to recognize is the fact that these are just isolated points. We are not focusing upon a very expansive approach. We need to make sure that the youths in the remote corners of the country, in the villages, they also have access to good quality education. But that is not being made possible. You already know the kind of cutthroat competition we have in these engineering colleges and the medical colleges. The seats are very few, but the players are a lot. The competitive players, that is the people who want to basically qualify the examination, the number is too much. So there is a kind of a scenario where we have very few seats. The education and skill infrastructure is again very weak, and it is not in a position to cater to the large population. Then we have the jobless growth. We all know that we transitioned from an agrarian economy to that of a service-led model. We did not focus adequately on the manufacturing aspect. So we suffered with respect to the employment. Right now what we are having high unemployment rates. We are having underemployment, disguised employment. So that is what you'll have to understand. Next, we have labor market mismatches. The kind of teaching which we have, the kind of pedagogy which is being given, it is still classical. We are not focusing upon the pragmatic aspect. There is a mismatch with respect to the demands of the industry. Industry is now progressing at a very high pace. They are basically integrating technology. You tell me, except few engineering colleges in the country, for example, the IITs or the top-notch colleges, we are still not having the artificial intelligence courses, right? So that is something which you'll have to understand. Though we use it, everyone uses it, but there has to be a kind of a scenario where the education has to be in the line of what the industry is demanding. Next aspect is that of the female labor force participation rate. If we compare India's female labor force participation rate with the other countries like Vietnam or Bangladesh, it's still minuscule. The kind of female participation we had in the economy in China during the booming years, that we don't have. Primarily because we have entrenched patriarchal notions. There are cultural notions in place which basically hinder the participation of women in the workforce. So there are many reasons you'll have to understand. The kind of opportunities we have in India, first of all, there are very few. There is a lot of competition. People are not getting the adequate wages. There is a kind of a glass ceiling for women. There are pay mismatches, right? So these are a number of factors. Then we have what the authors talk about is the migration as population equalizer. What they are saying is that migration is something, when we talk about the internal migration within the country, is something which is very important. It is a kind of an equalizer. Let's say you have a particular place which has a lot of economic resources with it, a lot of money and other things, but do not have the adequate human resources. So you can have the surplus regions like UP and Bihar providing the surplus labor, and there can be a kind of an equalizing effect. That is what you'll have to understand. What are the challenges and the kind of political discourse we are having? We already know that there are political debates with respect to migration. We already have seen what happened in Maharashtra or what happened in Tamil Nadu, right? So these are the issues which you'll have to understand. Acute discrimination. The migrants, they have, and see, you'll have to accept. When you are looking at a picture, and this is one of the very important points, you're all civil services aspirants. You'll have to look at the picture with a proper rationality. You cannot have your emotions in place over here. So you'll have to understand that the migrants have definitely, they have borne the blunt of discrimination. They have been discriminated against, right? In many cases, they have been beaten, right? Violence has been committed against them. Then we have identity is socially constructed. The kind of identity which these migrants are having, it is a kind of a social identity which they have been given. Not based upon the kind of work they're performing or how much they're contributing. No, it's a kind of a social identity that you are from UP, you are a Bihari, or you are from this particular area. That is what you will have to understand. And that creates the feeling of discrimination. Then we have disenfranchisement. What we are trying to say, that the people, the migrants in this particular area, they're disenfranchised. That is, they're not having the voting rights in these particular area. They are having the voting rights in their own native locations. And this creates a feeling of battle of belonging. That is, they neither feel that I am a person from my native village because I have been living in this place for years. And they neither feel that I am a person from this particular place where I'm working. Primarily because they don't have the voting rights. So there is a battle of belonging. What is the need of having equal and safe choice? When we talk about these centers which are absorbing a lot of migrants, they need to have the urban planning in this particular area, needs to have the migration input. Migration sensitive urban planning. This is the word, migration sensitive urban planning, where you incorporate the concerns of the migrants because they are the ones who are basically contributing the most with respect to the economic development of your place. So that is very important to understand. And safe choices. They need to be given the social security. The employers need to basically talk about the social security. They need to convince, they need to basically say to them that we are with them. We are with you, right? Next, we have longevity and social security. What it is trying to say. The authors are saying that India's population, along with having a very young population, we are also aging. According to Census 2011, the elder people in the country were 8.6%. And this is projected to increase to almost 15% by 2036. Now, this is this is according to the United Nations Population Fund Agency, UNFPA. So from the number of 8.6 according to census, this would increase to that of the 15%. So it has its own issues. Population would age, so we'll have our own issues. Old age people are more prone to exploitation, be it the financial exploitation or even physical exploitation. So we'll have to basically manage this particular population transition. New challenges. Challenges in the form of, as I told you, the exploitation. Then they're more prone to cyber frauds. You must have seen. Or they are more prone to the attacks. There are cases of thefts and burglary which take place because these people, the children are living in US and you have the elderly people living in these isolated locations, rich elderly people. And what these people do, the other people, the thieves and the burglars, they basically attack, and in many cases they also kill. So there are a lot of challenges. Plus there are issues with respect to the feminization of aging. Very important concept, the feminization of aging. Because most of the elderly people, they are the females and they have their own concerns. Most of them are poor. They do not have the adequate social security. They do not have the pension services. They are dependent upon their family members. And family members see these people as burdens. See, again, ideally, they need to be cared, right? They have a lot of experience with them. They can basically aid or give the young people the experience. They can make the young people to learn from their experiences. So that is the kind of situation we have. Redefine. What we need to do is redefine the aging. We need to come up with more employment opportunities where these elderly people can contribute, right? And social security, very, very important. Social security is the most important aspect. How we can basically focus upon that? By understanding that social security, for example, the pensions, it is not just the state responsibility. See, why I'm just elaborating upon these points is so that you can use these points in the answer. And this is a kind of an interdisciplinary topic where you can use in the essay or the GS1 or the GS2 or even GS3. So what I'm trying to say is that it is not just a state, this is a kind of a convention which we have, a notion which we have, that state has to contribute with respect to the social security. No. Why not the employers? Why not come up with more different avenues, different innovative products, right? Different insurance schemes which can contribute with respect to let's say the pensions and the other things. That is what you'll have to understand. And we'll have to focus upon the dignity aspect. What we have is Article 21, right? We'll have to make sure that the aging is dignified, that we give proper respects to them. Then we have what should be the way forward for all these things. We need to have a whole of government approach whenever we talk about demography. Whatever policy the government is coming up with, be it the policy of a Ministry of Health or Education or whatever, it needs to consider the demographic aspect. That's the first thing. And whenever you are coming up with a particular demographic policy, different ministries need to come on board so as to have a more holistic approach, so as to have a more of a stakeholder approach where different points can be integrated. Then we have mainstreaming the demographic thinking. What the authors are saying is that right now, the kind of data we have, it is focused upon specific metrics. It's focused upon, let's say, the death rate or the fertility rate or the mortality rate, whatever. It's not focused upon a proper explanation with respect to the age-sex composition or a more detailed aspect of the regional diversity which we have across the country. So that needs to be elaborated. Next thing, what they're trying to say is that there has to be the integration of technology. Very, very important. Technology has to be integrated so as to make sure that we can have a more robust data framework, a more real-time data framework, and then that can guide the policy implementation. Then we have managed the migration positively. The incoming states, the states which are receiving these migrants, they need to accept these migrants in a very positive manner, because ultimately these migrants are going to contribute economically to the development of that particular state. There has to be that kind of wholesome environment by the incoming state. Then we have inclusive development. We need to address the marginalization, especially against the vulnerable groups, be it the minorities or be it the SC/STs or the OBCs or the women. That has to be addressed. Demography is not just a statistical tool. It is a very real phenomena, and adequate policy measures have to be there in place so as to manage this particular transition in a very effective manner. Then we have empowering the human capabilities. Ultimately, this is the best thing which you can have, as what the Amartya Sen also talks about, having a human capability approach. Invest a lot in the health and education of the individuals. Invest in more opportunities, livelihood opportunities, self-employment opportunities, right? So that they can have productive employment gains. They can be gainfully employed. That is what we are focusing upon. And securing the aging population. through the pensions, through old age care homes, by coming up what we call as the silver economy, having a robust formal silver economy framework. So that is what we are trying to say, that demography is transitioning. We need to have a multifaceted approach. We cannot just look at the demography from a statistical point of view, from that of just collecting the numbers. We need to have a kind of an intervention where we focus upon different domains, be it the health, the education, the social security, the migration aspect. So that is what makes this particular topic very important. Let's have a mains practice question. Examine the need for a holistic demography mission in India. Discuss its possible objectives, challenges, and significance for inclusive and sustainable development. Very easy. Talk about the various aspects and write this particular answer. Let's go to the next section. Coming to the simplified section, we have the first topic, which talks about Supreme Court hinting that it might revisit the ban it imposed on the firecrackers in the Arjun Gopal versus Union of India 2018 case. And what people are saying is that it might allow the sale of green firecrackers. Now, what is really important in this article are three organizations. One is with respect to the NEERI, that is the National Environmental Engineering Research Institute. The second is the PISO, that is Petroleum and Explosive Safety Organization. And the third is the Commission for the Air Quality Management in the NCR region. Three organizations, very, very important. We'll look at them and we'll see what is the mandate and what is the composition. Now, the Supreme Court indicated that it may revisit its April 3 order imposing a year-long ban on the manufacture, storage, sale and use of firecrackers in the Delhi and the NCR region. A bench of Chief Justice of India, B.R. Gavai, and Justice K. Vinod Chandran said that it would examine the possibility of allowing the sale and use of green firecrackers, which emit very less pollution, right? Certified by the National Environmental Engineering Research Institute, NEERI, right? And the Petroleum and Explosives Safety Organizations during Deepavali. In its 2018 ruling in Arjun Gopal versus Union of India, important case, you can remember, the top court had declined to impose a complete ban on firecrackers but permitted the manufacture and sale of only green variants with reduced emissions and permissible noise levels. So it's not just with respect to the permissible air pollutants, but also permissible noise aspect, right? It also had prohibited the online sales and directed that such crackers be sold only through licensed traders. Chief Justice Gavai asked the advocate Uttara Babbar, who was appointed as the amicus curiae. What is the amicus curiae? It's basically the friend of the court, to basically give the court the advice with respect to that particular matter. Whether there had been any significant change in the air quality since 2018, Ms. Babbar referred to a report by the Commission on the Air Quality Management in the NCR, noting that there was no conclusive data to show deterioration, but that the report had recorded a dip in the post-Diwali pollution levels when bans were in place. In 2021, pre-Diwali, the particulate matter 2.5 was 163 and post-Diwali it rose to 354, almost a 117% increase. This percentage came down to 61% in 2024. So definitely, see, if you have, it's not about a question of the religious aspect, it's about rationality. Definitely, if you're going to have more of firecrackers being burning, definitely it would contribute a lot to the pollution, right? And that is what also reflected in the data. But the Solicitor General, however, countered these arguments and said there was no data establishing firecrackers as a primary cause of the pollution. Solicitor General, the advocate for the government, right? Mr. Mehta also presented a detailed proposal from the centre seeking to lift the blanket ban in Delhi, NCR and allow the sale of NEERI-approved green firecrackers under strict regulation. Now, this is again very important. There can be a question in the prelims. CSIR, National Environmental Engineering Research Institute, NEERI, a constituent laboratory of CSIR. It's a laboratory of CSIR, autonomous organization under the Department of Scientific and Industrial Research, Ministry of Science and Technology. Look at this, the CSIR, NEERI, is a research institute created and funded by the Government of India. It was established in Nagpur in 1958 with a focus on water supply, sewage disposal, communicable disease and industrial pollution. NEERI is a pioneer in environmental science and engineering and operates under the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR. The CSIR, known for its cutting-edge research and development knowledge base in diverse science and technology areas, is a contemporary R&D organization under the Ministry of Science and Technology, Government of India. So that is what you'll have to understand. These are the areas where it focuses upon. Next, we have the PISO, very important organization, and it's quite interesting to note the administrative ministry under which it works. So this is under Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Do remember, under the Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, the organization is PISO, Petroleum and Explosives Safety Organization. The PISO, formerly known as Department of Explosives since its inception on 1898, very old organization, right, pre-independence, has been serving the nation as a nodal agency for regulating the safety of hazardous substances such as explosives, compressed gases and petroleum. PISO's major work is to administer the responsibility delegated under the Explosives Act and the Petroleum Act of 1934 and the rules made under those acts. So with the overall objective of ensuring the safety and security of the public and property from fire and explosion, the organization as a statutory authority, it's a statutory authority, is entrusted with the administration of Explosives Act 1884, Petroleum Act, Inflammable Substances Act 1952, and the following rules framed under these acts. Then also to administer the responsibilities delegated under the Explosives Acts of 1884, this is the objective of the organization, and the Petroleum Act, and the rules made under related to manufacture, import, export, transport, possession, sale and use of explosives, petroleum products and compressed gases. Very important organization. Then we have the CAQM. It's a statutory body established under the Commission for the Air Quality Management in the NCR and Adjoining Areas Act of 2021. Statutory body, do remember. Mandate better coordination, research, identification and resolution of the problems surrounding the air quality index in this particular region. It undertakes action for the prevention and control of the air pollution in Delhi NCR and adjoining areas where the impacts of the air quality are observed. Then we have the Commission is required to coordinate in actions on monitoring of the air quality with the government of Delhi, Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh. The NCR region states powers restricting the activities. It has statutory powers. Influencing the air quality, investigating and conducting the research, issuing directions on different matters with respect to the pollution to different states. All the directions and orders by the commissions are of binding nature. There can be a statement in the prelims, so do remember. The commission is directly accountable to the parliament. Chairperson to be chaired by the government official of the rank of the Secretary to the Government of India or Chief Secretary. It will also have ex officio members who are either Chief Secretaries or Secretaries in charge of the department dealing with the environment aspect from the states of Delhi, Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh. Do remember these states, 5 states. 3 full-time technical members who have technical knowledge with respect to the pollution aspect. 3 members from the non-governmental organizations, technical members from the Central Pollution Control Board, Indian Space Research Organization and Niti Aayog, because the ISRO gives the images with respect to the pollution. So therefore, the members are also invited from the ISRO. That is what you have to know with respect to this particular topic. Let's go to the next one. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to a report by a non-governmental organization with respect to the state of affairs, the conditions of the State Information Commission. So again, very important article. As the 20th anniversary of the Right to Information Act approaches, many state information commissions and the Central Information Commission are either paralyzed or are so understaffed that the hearings could take years. The government is deliberately not appointing the officers with respect to the State Information Commission or with respect to the Central Information Commission. So if they do not have the adequate human resources, how would be they able to come out with respect to the grievance redressal aspect, right? The SICs and the CIC hear appeals and complaints when citizens are dissatisfied with the result of an RTI application. There were over 2.4 lakh appeals in 24 just alone. 2.4 lakhs. The latest edition of the Satark Nagrik Sangathan annual assessment shows that 6 state information commissions of these states were defunct for various periods between July 1st, 2024 to October 7th, 2025 as no new commissioner were appointed, right? So again, they were in a complete state of paralysis. The SIC, State Information Commissions of Karnataka, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Tamil Nadu and Bihar are functioning without a full strength of commissioners. The Central Information Commission, which hears the appeals against the RTI responses to the union government organizations, is functioning with only 2 information commissioners, with 9 vacancies, including for the Chief Information Commissioner. So this is the state of the affairs, right? And understand the right to information. These institutions are the core pillars of the right to information architecture. And right to information is again very important when we talk about the transparency aspect, when we talk about the governance aspect. The backlog is mounting with commissions on only able to dispose 1.8 lakh cases in a year with 2.4 lakh appeals. The reports shows that the Telangana SIC would take an estimated 29 years and 2 months a matter filed on July 1st, 2025 would be disposed of. That is the kind of state of affairs we have in these state commissions because of the non-appointment of the officials. 4 lakh appeals and complaints were pending as of June. Let's talk about the Central Information Commission and State Information Commissions. The CIC is a statutory body constituted under Section 12 of the Right to Information Act. Similar to the CIC, we have the State Information Commissions at the state level. Under Section 15 of the Right to Information Act, the main objectives to exercise the powers conferred under the RTI Act, to receive and inquire into the complaints from the citizen, to receive and decide upon the second appeal from any of the citizens. Section 19 of the RTI Act. What are the salient features? Composition: the CIC consists of the Chief Information Commissioner and not more than 10 Information Commissioners. That is what you have to understand. The SIC consists of a State Chief Information Commissioner and not more than 10 State Information Commissioners. Appointment: they're appointed by the President. When we talk about the Central Information Commission, on the recommendation of a committee consisting of the Prime Minister as a chairperson, Leader of Opposition of the Lok Sabha and Union Cabinet Minister nominated by the Prime Minister, and the State Information Commission, they are appointed by the Governor on the recommendation of a committee consisting of the Chief Minister as a chairman, the Leader of Opposition in the Legislative Assembly, and the State Cabinet Minister nominated by the Chief Minister. Eligibility: the members of the CIC and SIC shall be persons of eminence in the public life with wide knowledge and experience in law, science, technology, and other domains. Members shall not be a member of the Parliament or a member of the legislature of any state, in any case may be, or hold any office of profit. This is important. They should not hold any office of profit or connected with any of the political party. Tenure: the members shall hold office for a such term as prescribed by the central government. You must be aware that there were amendments made in 2019 with respect to the RTI Act. And therefore, now what the critics are saying is that the information commissions are totally under the control of the government, or until they attain the age of 65 years of age, whichever is earlier. Reappointment: the Chief Information Commissioner is not eligible for reappointment. Each IC, Information Commissioner, shall, on vacating his office, be eligible for appointment as a Chief Information Commissioner. Further, his or her term of office shall not be more than 5 years in aggregate as the IC and the CIC in total, right? It should not be more than 5 years. Every State Information Commissioner shall, on vacating his or her office, be eligible for appointment as a State Chief Information Commissioner. Further, his or her term of office shall not be more than 5 years in aggregate, including that of the Information Commissioner and the State Chief Information Commissioner. Removal: the President can remove the members of the CIC and the Governor can remove the members of the SIC, State Information Commission, under the following circumstances: if the member is adjudged and insolvent, goes bankrupt, central government or the state government holds him responsible for an offence involving moral turpitude, if he engages during his term of office in any paid employment outside the duties of his office, if he is declared unfit by reasons of infirmity of mind or of body, right? The President or Governor can remove the members on the grounds of proved misbehavior or incapacity, right? This is very important term, proved misbehavior or incapacity. In such cases, the President or the Governor has to refer the matter to the Supreme Court for the inquiry. After the inquiry, if the Supreme Court upholds the cause of the removal and advises so, then the President or the Governor can remove them. So this is not binding. The views of the Supreme Court are not binding. Salary and allowances: the allowances, salary, and other service conditions of the members shall be prescribed by the central government because of the RTI amendment. I already told you that it is what critics are saying is that you have basically controlled the whole architecture with respect to the Right to Information Act. What are the powers and the functions of the CIC and SIC? We have Section 18. It is a duty of the CIC and SIC to inquire into the complaints received from any person regarding the request under the RTI Act. Section 19, adjudication of a second appeal. Then we have Section 20, imposition of penalties by CIC and the SIC. It is if it is of the opinion that the Public Information Officer, PIO, either at the center of the state level has not performed his duty, access to all the public records. Then suo motu power, this is very important. They have the suo motu on its own. They can basically inquire into a particular ground. Secure the compliance with respect to the officers, public authorities, annual reports. So they also submit the annual report, which is placed on the floor of the House. What are the changes with respect to the CIC and SIC under the RTI amendment? The changes are, first, the term of the Chief Information Commissioner and the Information Commissioner shall be prescribed by the central government. The term of the State Information Commissioner and the Information Commissioner shall also be prescribed by the central government. That is how they are capturing the whole domain of the right to information. That is what the critics are saying. Salary, allowances and service conditions, these shall now be prescribed by the central government. What amount they're going to get in the salary, that would be decided by the central government. So that is the whole structure. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, we have a particular report by the National Crime Records Bureau, which talks about the crime situation in the country, right? The National Crime Records Bureau's annual report on crime and prison statistics have to be read with a strong caveat. most of the numbers cannot be compared between the states. Why we cannot compare numbers between the states? Because they're largely dependent upon the registration and reporting of the crimes. We cannot compare the number of crimes with that of the UP and the other state because of the kind of the environment we have, the policing we have in different states. Maybe the registrations are more in a particular state, right? So that is what you'll have to understand. Are largely dependent upon the registration and reporting of the crimes in the first place. However, certain national trends and sharp year-on-year changes within the states can still reveal meaningful patterns that could demand policy interventions. What are these patterns? The recent NCRB report for 2023, which is delayed by a year, points to a worrying trend of postponed surveys. First of all, we are not having the data on time. We are having 23 data right now. So that is again a cause of concern. Reports and even the census under the current union government. But there are also three telling numbers. First, 2.8% decrease in the murder cases around the country. A staggering 28.8% surge in the crimes against scheduled tribes. 28.8% primarily in the context of the Manipur, right? And a 31% increase in cyber crimes. We all know that. We are becoming technological savvy. We are using more of technologies on a daily basis. So it's bound to have, right? These cyber frauds would definitely increase. Therefore, we need to have more effective policies in place. The other two numbers are alarming. The steep rise in the crimes against the STs is because of the ethnic violence in the Manipur. Registered number increasing from this to this. Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan also recorded significant high crime rates against the tribals, suggesting their vulnerability in the central Indian states. So the tribal groups in Maharashtra, in Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan, they're again suffering because of the various atrocities being committed. With greater internet penetration across the country, there has been an increase in the cyber crime, particularly related to the financial frauds and sexual exploitation. The numbers must have gone up even further in the last 2 years with the greater use of digital financial instruments. We're talking about 23. In the last 2 years, definitely the numbers must have gone more. In the financial instruments and daily transactions and investments, while policing has tried to keep up with the growing menace of cybercrime, with specialized cells, the ubiquitousness, the presence, all around presence of the internet, and deepening spread of digital crimes require more sophistication and dedication. Crimes against children rose by 9.2% in 23. So there have been increasing cases of crimes against children, with the offender known to the victim in 96% of the cases. Well, the increase could be a function of the improved reporting, because with the improved reporting, we have more cases, so that could be a reason. The high numbers suggest that states must work on a war footing to sensitize the children about these crimes. A subset of these crimes could also include the application of the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act in the case of consensual adolescent relationships. And this area needs to be carefully handled. This is a very sensitive issue with respect to the POCSO. That is what you'll have to understand. Reported crimes against women registered a modest increase of 0.4%, but this masks a 14.9% spike in the dowry-related crimes, pointing to a persistent social issue. So still we have the dowry-related crimes, right? What is NCRB? It was set up in 86 to function as a repository of information on the crimes and criminals, and was based on the recommendation of the Tandon Committee, the National Police Commission, and the Ministry of Home Affairs. It's a part of the MHA, Ministry of Home Affairs, and is headquartered in New Delhi. It also acts as the national warehouse for the fingerprint records of the Indian and foreign criminals and assists in locating the interstate criminals through its fingerprint search. The NCRB has 4 different divisions: publications, the crimes in India, accidental death, and the present status statistics, and the other thing, the crime statistics. These publications serve the principal reference point on crime statistics, not only for the police officers, but also for the criminologists, researchers, media, and policymakers, so that we can have more effective policy interventions on the basis of the findings of the NCRB reports. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to the Nobel Peace Prize. Sadly, Mr. Trump has not won the Nobel Peace Prize, but the person who has won the Peace Prize, she has definitely acknowledged the great contributions made by President Trump with respect to the global peace, right? So we have Venezuelan opposition leader Corina Machado won the Nobel Peace Prize on Friday for her struggle to achieve democratic transition in the South American country. And the committee has described her as a woman who keeps the flame of democracy burning amid a growing darkness. The former opposition presidential candidate is a key unifying figure in the once deeply divided opposition to President Nicolas Maduro's government. Understand that she was basically contesting elections against President Nicolas Maduro, but her election was cancelled, and she is a kind of a person who talks about the democratic ideals in Venezuela, where you have a kind of a dictatorship by President Nicolas Maduro. Ms. Machado said that she was confident that the opposition would succeed in securing a peaceful transition to the democracy, in securing democracy in her country. I dedicate this prize to the suffering people of Venezuela and to President Trump for his decisive support for our cause. So President Trump, he has basically got a kind of an acknowledgement from the Peace Prize winner. Mr. Maduro's government has routinely targeted its real or perceived opponents. Ms. Machado, who turned 58 this week, was set to run against Mr. Maduro in last year's presidential election, but the government disqualified her. The country's National Electoral Council, which is stacked with Maduro's loyalists, declared him the winner despite credible evidence on the contrary. The election results announced by the Electoral Council sparked protests, to which the government responded with a force that ended with 20 people being killed. Ms. Machado becomes the 20th woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize. So she's the 20th woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Let's go to the last topic. Coming to the last topic of today's discussion, this is with respect to the exercise KONKAN 25, important, can be asked in the prelims. The sea phase of the bilateral maritime exercises KONKAN 25 between Indian Navy and UK's Royal Navy. So this is between Indian Navy and that of the UK's Navy. Was concluded on Wednesday following a series of high-tempo naval operations designed to enhance the interoperability, operational readiness, and maritime cooperation between the participating navies. Indian Navy informed that during the sea phase, the forces undertook a wide spectrum of complex maritime drills encompassing tactical air warfare, air defense, surface and anti-submarine operations, and underway replenishment, having these access to various sources on the sea itself, right? The sea phase ended with a ceremonial stempast where participating units exchanged traditional naval courtesies. So that is what you have to understand. Maybe a question can come in the prelims with respect to this particular exercise. That is from my side. I hope the session was really fruitful for you. All the very best. Thank you so much.